What does it take for a woman to break in public and still rise in private? Have you ever watched someone you loved become a stranger, right in front of a crowd that clapped for your pain? Imagine walking into a room, pregnant, heart shattered, only to face the betrayal you feared most, under the spotlight. But here's the twist. What if she wasn't just a housewife? What if she was the storm they never saw coming? Trust me, you'll want to hear how this story ends. The boardroom was sleek, silent, and filled with power. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline like a living portrait. 12 of the city's most influential executives sat around the massive glass table, their Armani sleeves brushing against portfolios worth millions. And at the head of it all sat Liam Carter, CEO of Carter Global, tech mogul, venture capitalist, self-made millionaire at 33. The kind of man that walked into a room and made it his. Until now, the glass doors burst open without warning. Everyone turned. And there she was, Avery Carter, his wife, 6 months pregnant, no makeup, no assistant, no PR handler, just raw emotion and an envelope clutched in her hand. The room went still, the kind of still that made your skin prickle. The kind of still that comes before a storm hits and no one knows where to run. Liam stood up slowly, confusion and panic flooding his face. Avery? Her name cracked the silence, but her stare silenced him again. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. Her gaze landed not just on Liam, but briefly flicked to the woman seated 3 chairs down. Claire, his assistant, his mistress. Avery's stare lingered on Claire's French manicured hands resting a little too casually on the table, on the way she avoided eye contact, on the smirk that had vanished from her lips. The smugness had died the second Avery walked in. Do we need to call security? One of the older board members whispered, already sweating under his $1,000 suit. No, Liam said, his voice cracking. She's my wife. Avery's stomach moved slightly beneath her coat, a soft kick, as if her unborn child knew it was witnessing the downfall of a king. She stepped forward. Each heel click on the marble floor sounded like a gavel. Liam tried to move around the table. You shouldn't be here. We're in the middle of a quarterly. I know what you're in the middle of, Avery interrupted, her voice calm but cold. It was the first thing she'd said, and it cut deeper than any scream could have. Every executive in the room pretended to glance away, pretend not to watch, but their eyes flicked back with every breath she took. This wasn't just gossip. This was history. This was the fall of a man who thought he could have it all. Avery took a deep breath, then gently placed the envelope on the center of the table. The red wax seal shimmered under the boardroom lights. Liam's face paled. Claire shifted uncomfortably in her seat, suddenly very aware of the plunging neckline of her blouse, of the way her lipstick looked too bright under Avery's stare. Avery turned her head toward her. I knew, she said quietly. About you, about them, about the hotel receipts on the Amex business card, about the phone calls labeled conference prep at midnight. Claire opened her mouth, but no words came. You think silence protects you? Avery said. You have no idea how loud it is to sit at home, alone, pregnant, while your husband is out building empires on lies. Liam stepped forward, hands raised slightly. Avery, please? Can we talk somewhere private? She looked at him, really looked. 6 years of marriage, 5 rounds of IVF, 3 miscarriages, 1 baby now finally on the way, and he threw it away for someone who couldn't even look her in the eye. You don't get to ask me for privacy, she said. Not after you humiliated me with someone half my age in the same office I helped you build. There it was. The board flinched as if they'd all been slapped. Liam tried again. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Avery laughed. One bitter, breathless sound. You're right, I wasn't supposed to walk in. I was supposed to be at home, in bed, knitting tiny hats and hoping you remembered my prenatal appointment. Claire finally spoke. Maybe this isn't the time or place. It's exactly the time, Avery snapped. And it's exactly the place. She turned back to Liam, her voice steady. That envelope is our divorce agreement. Pre-signed, pre-approved, full custody. You get your reputation, what's left of it. I get the one thing that matters. Liam stared at her belly. You're serious, he said. I was serious the day I said I do. You stopped being serious the moment you decided Claire was worth more than your family. Nobody in the room moved. Nobody breathed. Finally, Avery stepped back, turned toward the door. But just before she left, she turned one last time. "Gentlemen," she addressed the board, "if you're wondering whether this will affect Carter Global's IPO next quarter," she paused, "I wouldn't worry. The real brains behind the company left this morning, with me." Gasps, murmurs, a dropped pen. And with that, Avery Carter walked out, back straight. Eyes forward, she never looked back, not even once. Long before she was Mrs. Avery Carter, the woman who walked into a boardroom and brought a corporation to its knees, she was just Avery Collins, the girl no one saw coming. She was born in Asheville, North Carolina, the daughter of a single mother who worked double shifts at a hospital cafeteria just to keep the lights on. Her father? Gone before her first birthday. Left behind a box of old letters, 2 unpaid parking tickets, and a string of broken promises that never meant much anyway. Avery learned early that if she wanted something, she'd have to build it herself. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The air always smelled like bleach and fabric softener, and the noise of spinning dryers became the soundtrack of her childhood. While other kids played with iPads, Avery read library books under flickering hallway lights. While her classmates brought Lunchables and Gushers, she packed peanut butter sandwiches and apples wrapped in paper towels. She never complained, not once. That was the thing about Avery. She wasn't born tough. Life made her that way. She was quiet but observant, always watching, always calculating. In high school, she tutored classmates for gas money. In college, she worked the night shift at a diner and still graduated top of her class from NYU with a degree in business strategy and behavioral psychology. But even with her grades and grit, the doors of Manhattan's financial world didn't exactly swing open, at least not at first. She applied for 76 jobs after graduation, got 5 callbacks, 2 interviews, 1 offer, a marketing assistant role at a boutique tech incubator in Soho. She took it without hesitation. That's where she met him, Liam Carter. He was a rising star even then, cocky, confident, magnetic. He wore crisp suits even on casual Fridays and carried the scent of ambition like it was his cologne. Everyone noticed him. Everyone wanted to be near him. Except Avery. She was too busy analyzing data, running point on analytics no one else cared about. While others tried to flirt with Liam, Avery challenged his ideas in meetings. She didn't laugh at his jokes. She didn't try to impress him. And that was exactly why he noticed her. One afternoon, he asked her to stay late to help prepare a pitch deck for a new investor. She assumed it was just business. Until it wasn't. They ordered Chinese food, laughed about their mutual hatred of motivational posters. He confessed that her mind intimidated him, in a good way. "I've never met someone who makes me want to be smarter," he said. It wasn't a line, she could tell. Liam Carter was many things, but fake wasn't one of them. At least not then. That night marked the beginning. Their relationship unfolded like a slow-burning fire. Unexpected, intimate, dangerous. Within a year, they were inseparable. He left the incubator and launched his first startup. She left with him, unofficially, handling operations from their cramped apartment while balancing freelance gigs to keep the lights on. They were broke, but in love. Building something real. Avery didn't just support Liam, she built him. She reworked pitch decks, brokered backdoor deals, coached him before meetings. She was the reason he got that first round of funding from the Graywell Group. But nobody ever saw her in the press photos. She didn't care. At least, not back then. They got married at City Hall. No family. No friends. Just a witness and a courthouse clerk who pronounced them husband and wife. Avery wore a $50 white dress she bought off clearance. Liam wore the same navy suit he wore to investor meetings. That night, they toasted with champagne they couldn't afford and danced barefoot in their living room to Frank Sinatra on a dusty old speaker. They were happy. For a while. But success changes people. And money? Money doesn't make people greedy. It just reveals who they always were. As Liam's company grew, so did the distance between them. He started traveling more, working later, hosting dinners without her. At first, he said it was optics. "Some of these rooms aren't ready for a woman like you yet, Ave. Let me build the table first." She believed him. Because that's what Avery did. She believed in people, in love, in loyalty. She believed it right up until she found the first lipstick-stained receipt in his coat pocket. At first, she told herself it was nothing. A mistake. A misunderstanding. Then came the late-night calls. The scent of unfamiliar perfume, the sudden privacy settings on his phone, the way he stopped asking how her day was, how he skipped their third IVF appointment and blamed it on a crisis at the office. She wasn't stupid. She was heartbroken. But not stupid. She knew. And yet she stayed. Because they had history. Because she wanted this baby more than anything. Because part of her still hoped the man she married was buried somewhere beneath the CEO mask he now wore like armor. But there's only so long a woman like Avery can pretend. Only so long she can silence her instincts, her pride, her worth. The day she got confirmation, the private investigator's photos, the credit card charges, the hotel bookings, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She went quiet, dangerously quiet. She stood in front of the mirror, one hand on her belly, and whispered, "I promise, little one, you'll never see me broken." That night, she didn't beg. She planned. The lawyer, the documents, the speech, and this morning, she put on her coat, looked herself in the mirror one last time, and walked into Carter Global headquarters. Not as a broken wife, not as a victim, but as the storm. The Clarion Grand Hotel was a monument to old money and new power. With its 24-foot ceilings, crystal chandeliers dripping like frozen waterfalls, and floors polished until they reflected your every flaw, it was the kind of place where secrets wore tuxedos and betrayal came dressed in couture. That evening, it hosted the annual Founders Gala, an exclusive gathering for tech elites, CEOs, and power couples who wore their net worth on their sleeves. It was black tie only, $10,000 per plate, and sponsored by Carter Global. And for the first time in 3 years, Avery Carter was not on the guest list. But she was going anyway. She didn't need an invitation. She had a purpose. Inside the ballroom, violins played a haunting rendition of Claire de Lune as guests floated through the space like they were on silk strings. Champagne flutes clinked against manicured nails, and soft murmurs of mergers and market shares danced in the air like perfume. Liam Carter stood near the stage, surrounded by investors, tech darlings, and society page regulars. His tuxedo was tailored to perfection, his Rolex catching the chandelier light just right. At his side, draped on his arm like an accessory, was Claire, the mistress. She wore red. Not just any red, but a blood-red, satin-finished gown with a slit so high it defied logic and taste. Her hair was swept back in a sleek bun, diamond studs glinting in her ears. She laughed loudly, too loudly, at Liam's every word, placing her hand on his chest like she had every right to be there. No one asked questions. At events like this, loyalty was negotiable. Morality was optional. But when Avery stepped onto the marble floor at the entrance, everything shifted. She wore black, a silk off-the-shoulder gown that hugged her pregnant form like a second skin. Her hair was pulled back in a low chignon, her eyes outlined just enough to make them dangerous. No jewelry, no entourage, just presence. One woman, one stare, one storm. A murmur rippled through the crowd like wind across water. Some whispered, some gasped. Everyone turned. She didn't walk fast, she didn't smile. She moved with the stillness of someone who knew they didn't need to make a scene, because their existence was the scene. Claire froze mid-laugh, the glass in her hand trembling slightly. Liam looked up, his breath catching like it had been stolen from his lungs. He hadn't seen her since she left him that morning. And now she was here, stepping into his world like she owned it, because, in a way, she always had. "Mrs. Carter," one of the board members said, voice strained. "We weren't expecting you." "I'm not here for you," she replied calmly, walking past him like he was furniture. The crowd parted for her. Not because they wanted to, because they couldn't help it. She reached the edge of the ballroom floor and locked eyes with Liam. His mouth opened, but no words came. Claire clutched his arm tighter. "What is she doing here?" she whispered, voice sharp and brittle. Liam swallowed hard. "I don't know." Avery stopped a few feet from them, eyes glancing from Claire to Liam and back. "I see you've traded class for convenience," she said, voice cool as winter. Claire stepped forward, lips twitching with fake confidence. "You weren't invited. This is a private event." Avery's gaze was a dagger. "And yet, you're the one who doesn't belong." The crowd was silent now, all eyes on them. A reporter from Business Insider subtly lifted her phone, already recording. Avery turned to the audience. "For those of you wondering, yes, I'm still married to this man, and yes, that is our child I'm carrying." Gasps. A murmur. Someone dropped a glass. A camera flashed. "But don't worry," she continued, her tone rising just enough to carry. "The divorce papers were delivered this morning. I thought it was only right to let his new colleague enjoy him fully, with no legal complications." Claire blanched. Liam stepped forward. "Avery, this isn't the place." "No," she interrupted. "This is exactly the place. You chose to parade her in public, so let the public watch." She reached into her clutch and pulled out a folded document, raising it high enough for the front row to see. "Prenup. Signed, witnessed, filed. Liam Carter keeps his shares. I keep my name, my child, and my dignity." Someone clapped. She turned to the crowd, her voice steadier than ever. "To the women in this room, never let your silence become a favor to a man who doesn't deserve it. To the men, loyalty isn't a negotiation. And to Claire," she turned back, smile deadly, "you can have what's left of him." With that, she turned. The crowd parted again. And as she walked away, back straight, heels clicking against the marble like war drums, Claire turned to Liam and hissed, "You said she wouldn't come." He didn't answer, because for the first time he realized he never really knew Avery at all. Long before Liam Carter became the polished CEO of Carter Global, the man whose name carried weight in boardrooms from Wall Street to Silicon Valley, he was just a boy chasing power like it was oxygen. Born into a middle-class family in Milwaukee, Liam was the youngest of 3 brothers, and the only one who didn't settle for ordinary. His father was a mechanic. His mother worked at a dry cleaner. They lived paycheck to paycheck. But Liam always craved more. More attention, more applause, more everything. In high school, he wasn't the smartest or the most athletic, but he was the one who could convince anyone of anything. Teachers adored him, coaches trusted him, and girls fell for that smirk that hinted he knew more than he let on. He used charm the way other kids used textbooks. By the time he got to Columbia University on a scholarship, Liam had already decided he wasn't going to live life scraping by. He wanted legacy. He wanted empire. And he didn't care what he had to do or who he had to use to get it. That's where Avery came in. When they met, she was a threat wrapped in kindness. She didn't fall for his charm. She saw past the bravado. She asked questions no one else dared to. And that fascinated him. She challenged him, grounded him, made him feel like he could be something real. So he married her. Not because he was in love, though at times he told himself he was, but because he believed she was his equal. The brains to his ambition, the balance to his chaos. And for a while, it worked. Together, they built Carter Global from nothing. She was his secret weapon, the one behind the spreadsheets, the pitches, the negotiations. She stayed out of the spotlight because that's how she liked it. Or so he thought. But as the company grew, so did Liam's ego. Success wrapped around him like armor. The media called him a genius. Investors lined up. He started believing the myth. And slowly, he began to forget the woman who helped write it. Late nights turned into business trips. Business trips turned into parties. Parties turned into secrets. And then came Claire. She was everything Avery wasn't. Loud, flashy, easy. Claire didn't challenge Liam. She worshipped him. She laughed at every joke, hung on every word, and made him feel like a god. She didn't care about who he used to be. She only saw what he was now, a man with power, money, and access. Their affair didn't start with passion. It started with validation. The first kiss happened at a hotel bar in Chicago after a product launch. Avery had canceled her flight last minute. Morning sickness, exhaustion, something about an ultrasound reschedule. Liam had been irritated, tired of being reminded that his wife was no longer a partner, just a pregnant woman slowing him down. Claire slid into the bar seat next to him like she belonged there. She bought him a drink. She wore perfume that reminded him of ambition and recklessness. And when she leaned in close and whispered, "You deserve to feel alive again," he didn't resist. He told himself it was just a fling. But it wasn't. Claire was calculating. She knew exactly what she was doing. Every smile, every touch, every whispered compliment was designed to wrap herself around his world. She made herself useful, organizing investor events, smoothing over PR hiccups, even feeding ideas into pitch meetings and making sure they were credited to Liam. She became indispensable, and Liam, he became addicted to the ease, the flattery, the illusion of control. At home, Avery was tired, distant, focused on vitamins, nursery themes, doctor's appointments. She spoke of stability, family, legacy. Claire spoke of power, opportunity, expansion. He started resenting Avery, not for who she was, but for the parts of himself she reminded him of. The struggling startup days, the ramen dinners, the years when nothing came easy. With Claire, everything felt like winning. So when she suggested attending the Founders Gala together publicly, he hesitated, but only for a second. Avery's not coming, he said, convincing himself. She won't even know. Claire's smile was cold and triumphant. She'll find out eventually, she said, sipping wine. Might as well control the narrative. That night, when Avery walked into the ballroom like a queen returning to reclaim her throne, something inside Liam cracked. Not guilt. Panic. He realized too late that he had underestimated her. He thought she'd stay home, thought she'd cry, thought she'd beg. Instead, she came with fire in her eyes and divorce papers in her bag. She wasn't broken, she was done. And suddenly, Claire didn't feel like power anymore. She felt like a mistake. After Avery left the gala, Liam stood frozen in front of the crowd, mask shattered, pride bleeding out like a wound. The applause had stopped. The smiles had faded. All that remained was silence, and a man who built an empire but lost the only person who helped him build it. And Claire? She stood by his side, still smiling. But it wasn't the same smile, because she knew the truth too. She'd won the man, but she would never be the queen. It should have been her night too. Avery had spent the past 5 years helping build Carter Global into a name that commanded respect in every room it entered. She had stayed up through pitch revisions, coached Liam before investor calls, and drafted half the strategy papers he now took credit for. But when she arrived at the company's 10-year anniversary celebration, a black tie affair at the Langford Ballroom, her name wasn't even on the guest list. She stood in front of the registration table, holding her invitation like armor. "I'm sorry," the event coordinator said, eyes flicking to her screen. "I don't see Avery Carter on the list." Avery smiled politely, suppressing the rising heat in her chest. "Check again. It's probably under Mrs. Liam Carter." The coordinator hesitated. Then, after typing a few more keys, her face fell. "Oh yes, there's a +1 listed, but it's not you." Avery blinked. "Excuse me?" The woman looked mortified. "The name is Claire Monroe." For a full 3 seconds, Avery said nothing. Then she nodded once, as if she had just been handed confirmation of a truth she already knew. She walked past the table without another word. Inside, the ballroom glowed with gold-trimmed decadence. Waiters in white gloves moved through crystal chandeliers and velvet-draped tables. A jazz quartet played near the bar. Influencers, VCs, and tech elite mingled in designer gowns and perfectly knotted bow ties. At the center of it all stood Liam, smiling, laughing, a whiskey in hand, and Claire, his assistant, clinging to his arm in a champagne-colored gown that was far too expensive for someone with her salary. The press circled them like moths to a flame. Cameras clicked. Avery stood in the shadows for a moment, breathing through the knot in her throat. Then she stepped forward. She didn't shout, didn't scream. She simply walked up to the man who shared her last name and tapped his shoulder. Liam turned, mid-sentence, and froze. "Avery," he said, voice faltering. "What are you?" Claire shifted beside him, clearly irritated by the interruption. "Can we help you with something?" Avery looked her dead in the eye. "I wasn't aware this company had a policy of replacing wives with secretaries," she said, voice calm but sharp enough to draw blood. Gasps rippled through the circle of guests. Someone dropped their drink. One of the reporters, never one to miss a moment, raised his phone and began recording. Claire straightened her shoulders. "That's inappropriate." Avery smiled tightly. "So is sleeping with your boss." Liam stepped between them. "Avery, please, let's talk about this privately." She cut him off. "No, you made it public the moment you brought her here. So let's be honest, in front of your investors, your friends, the press." Her voice rose just enough to silence the room. "I am Avery Carter, co-founder of Carter Global, wife of Liam Carter, 6 months pregnant with his child, and completely erased from this event." Claire stepped forward, mock concern etched into her face. "Avery, maybe you should sit down. You seem unwell." Avery turned to the crowd, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "Do I look unwell? Or do I look like a woman who gave up everything for a man who now pretends she doesn't exist?" Nobody dared answer. She stepped back slightly, letting her words sink into the walls. Then she did what no one expected. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a single envelope. "This," she said. Lifting it up, is a formal notice to the board. I am resigning from my advisory role effective immediately. Someone gasped. Another executive whispered to his partner. But before I leave, she added, I want to thank a few people. She walked past the stunned crowd, eyes locked on Liam. To my husband, Brett, she said, voice shaking only slightly. Thank you for reminding me what betrayal looks like. I will never forget it. She turned to Claire. And to you? Thank you for showing me that ambition without integrity is just greed and heels. Claire's mouth dropped open, but Avery didn't wait for a response. She faced the room one last time. To every woman in this crowd, don't let anyone write you out of your own story. Don't shrink for anyone who grows by belittling you. Then she walked away. No tears, no breakdown. Just strength, and a silence that said more than any speech ever could. Behind her, whispers ignited like wildfire. Liam stood frozen, humiliated in front of everyone who once idolized him. And Claire? Her moment of victory had turned to ash in her throat. The moment Avery stepped out of the ballroom and into the cold night air, the strength that had carried her for hours began to unravel. The heavy doors closed behind her with a soft thud, but it echoed in her chest like a gunshot. Her heels clicked once on the pavement before she stumbled, the weight of everything suddenly too much. Her breathing quickened. The muscles in her shoulders, tight from holding it all together, began to shake. The wind cut through her gown, cruel and sharp, and for the first time all night she felt it, truly felt it. The humiliation, the betrayal, the unbearable loneliness of standing in front of hundreds of people, and realizing not one of them had stepped forward to stop it. She made it as far as the curb before the tears came. Not gentle, cinematic tears, but real ones. Ugly, violent. Heaving sobs that left her breathless and shaking. Her hands gripped the edge of the nearest lamppost, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her clutch dropped to the ground with a soft thud, spilling the contents, lip balm, tissues, a folded ultrasound photo. She didn't even notice. Her world was spinning too fast. Her heart felt like it was collapsing inward, a black hole sucking in every ounce of dignity she had left. She didn't care who saw her. She didn't care if the press followed her out. She just wanted to disappear. Avery slid down to the sidewalk, knees hitting the concrete hard. She wrapped her arms around her belly instinctively, a silent apology to the child growing inside her. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry, baby. I thought I could protect you. I thought he would change. The words dissolved into sobs again. Somewhere in the distance, car horns honked. A siren wailed, but none of it mattered, because in that moment, Avery Carter, the woman who once stood at the center of tech empires, who once spoke in front of investor panels and advised Fortune 500 CEOs, felt like nothing. Just a broken wife. Just a discarded woman. Just another name erased from the guest list. She stayed there for what felt like an hour, but it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. Eventually, a kind stranger approached. A woman, maybe mid-40s, in a coat too thin for the weather. Ma'am, are you okay? Should I call someone? Avery looked up, her mascara smudged, her hands trembling. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. The woman hesitated, then gently knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't have to talk, she said softly. Just breathe, you're not alone, okay? Whatever it is, you're not alone. That broke something in Avery all over again, because she did feel alone, utterly, completely, until now. The woman offered her a tissue. I've been there, she whispered. Not the same story, but I know heartbreak when I see it. Avery took the tissue, nodded shakily, and wiped her face. Thank you, she managed to croak. You want me to call a friend? A cab? Avery shook her head. No, I'll call someone. The woman squeezed her shoulder gently, then stood rigid. You're stronger than you think, she said before disappearing into the crowd. Avery gathered the contents of her bag slowly, hands still trembling. The ultrasound photo had folded at the corner. She smoothed it out gently and stared at it. 2 tiny feet. A round head, a flicker of life. And suddenly, something inside her shifted. It wasn't peace, it wasn't strength, not yet, but it was something. A spark, faint, fragile, but real. She couldn't fall apart. Not completely, not while that heartbeat still echoed inside her. She forced herself to her feet, legs shaky. She flagged down a cab and gave the driver the address to her sister's apartment. When she arrived, her sister Grace didn't ask questions. She just opened the door and pulled Avery into a hug so tight it unraveled her again. This time the tears were quieter, softer, less like a storm, more like rain after a wildfire. Grace helped her change into sweats, made her tea, and sat beside her on the couch in silence. Avery stared ahead, eyes red and swollen, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know who I am without him." Grace turned to her, voice firm but kind. "Yes, you do. You've just forgotten." Avery looked down at her hands, resting on her stomach. "He erased me, Grace, like I was nothing." "No," Grace said. "He erased who he needed you to be, not who you really are." That night, Avery didn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the edge of a blanket. She replayed everything. The gala, the stares, the smirk on Claire's face, the silence in the crowd, and the moment she stepped into the street and broke like glass. But even as she lay there, wrecked and raw, another thought began to form. A question. A whisper. What if this wasn't the end? What if this was the beginning? For days after the gala, Avery stayed quiet, not because she was broken, but because she was calculating. Every phone call, every text, every news headline about Liam Carter's wife's public breakdown didn't rattle her. Let them talk. Let them think she was humiliated and retreating, because what they didn't know was that Avery Carter had been playing the long game all along, and the next move was hers. She didn't grow up with power, but she learned how to move among it, how to study it, understand it, and most importantly, use it. And before she ever took Liam Carter's last name, she already had one of her own. Avery Langston. The Langston name wasn't just respected. It was legendary. Old money, old empires. Her late grandfather had been one of the founding board members of Wilshire National Bank. Her uncle ran Langston Ventures, a $3.2 billion private equity firm with ties across Europe and Asia. Her family had always been discreet. And Avery? She'd chosen to live quietly, on her terms. She rejected the spotlight. She never used the family name. She wanted to be seen for her mind, not her inheritance. That's why she'd hidden it. Even from Liam. Especially from Liam. He never asked about her family. And when she didn't bring it up, he assumed there was nothing to know. He married her thinking she was just another brilliant but broke girl with a good head on her shoulders. That's what made it easy to control her, dismiss her, erase her. And now he would find out what it meant to underestimate the wrong woman. The morning after the breakdown, Avery made 2 phone calls. The first was to Jasper Lane, her family's attorney, known in elite circles as the Clean Blade. He didn't talk, he didn't smile, he didn't lose. The second was to Evelyn Langston, her aunt and current chairwoman of Langston Ventures. "Avery," Evelyn answered, her voice smooth and sharp. "I saw the headlines." "I know," Avery said. "They embarrassed you. Publicly." "Yes." There was a pause. "Do you want to stay silent?" Evelyn asked. "Or do you want to make history?" Avery looked out the window, eyes narrowing. "I want him to know who he married." Later that day, a press release dropped on the Langston Ventures official site. Langston Ventures to launch $100 million female-led innovation fund, headed by new managing director Avery Langston Carter. The announcement made headlines within minutes. TechCrunch, Forbes, Bloomberg, everyone was suddenly talking about Avery again. But this time, not as the scorned wife. This time, as a force. Phone calls poured in. VCs who once brushed her off were now asking for meetings. Former colleagues emailed apologies masked as congratulations. Even Liam saw it, his phone buzzing with the headline just as he sat in a damage control meeting with his PR team. He stared at the screen for a full minute, heart sinking with every word. Avery Langston Carter. His wife had been a Langston? He looked up, stunned. Did anyone here know? No one answered. Of course they didn't, because Avery had played the part so perfectly. Modest, practical, unassuming. And now she wasn't playing anymore. While Liam panicked, Avery moved. She walked into Langston HQ, wearing a tailored navy suit, no makeup except for red lipstick sharp as a blade. Her aunt introduced her to the board as the future of modern investment. They didn't question it, because in this world last names mattered, legacy mattered, and Avery had both. But she didn't lean on them. She didn't need to. She had spent years building Carter Global behind the curtain. She knew numbers, trends, metrics. She had instincts no spreadsheet could measure. She was sharp, analytical, and now unchained. On her first day, she called a meeting with her newly assigned executive team. "I don't want this to be about revenge," she said, her voice cool and calm. "I want it to be about vision. We're not building a fund to compete with Carter Global." They all sat up straighter. "We're building the empire Carter Global was too short-sighted to imagine." The room buzzed with quiet electricity. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't a comeback. This was a reset. Later that week, Avery granted one media interview with Eliza Ford, anchor at Global Business Today. "Avery, people were shocked to learn about your family background. Why keep it hidden?" She smiled. "Because I wanted to build something that was mine, not inherited, not expected." "And what about your ex-husband? What would you say to him if he's watching this?" Avery paused just for a second, then looked straight into the camera. "I'd say thank you." Eliza blinked. "Thank you?" "Yes," Avery said, smile unfaltering, "because if he hadn't tried to break me, I wouldn't have remembered what I was made of." That quote trended for 3 days, and by the time Liam saw it, it was already too late. Avery wasn't just surviving, she was ascending. It started with a haircut. Nothing drastic, just a few inches off, enough to feel new. Avery sat in the leather chair of an exclusive uptown salon, one that catered to CEOs, heiresses, and the kind of women who didn't ask for a price before booking. She didn't tell the stylist what she'd been through. She didn't need to. Women like that could tell just by the way she sat. Rigid, wounded, ready. "You want something strong," the stylist said. Avery looked up at her reflection. "Yes," she replied. "Something that doesn't ask permission." The stylist smiled. When Avery walked out of that salon, she wasn't the same woman who cried on the sidewalk outside the gala. Her dark hair now framed her face like it was meant to say, "Watch me now." From there, the transformation accelerated. She revamped her wardrobe, replacing safe, neutral knits with sharp, tailored suits, statement dresses, silk blouses that didn't whisper but commanded. Everything she wore from then on had intention. Not to impress, not to seduce, but to assert. She no longer walked, she glided. She didn't shrink in rooms, she filled them. At Langston Ventures, her presence turned heads. Executives who once doubted her now took notes when she spoke. Venture partners requested her input before finalizing deals. Journalists began referring to her as the silent powerhouse, a woman who didn't need to scream to shake an industry. And Avery? She didn't just rebrand, she evolved. Her first major move was investing $15 million in a female-founded cybersecurity startup that had been rejected by every major fund in the city, including Carter Global. When reporters asked why she backed them, her answer was simple. "Because they remind me of who I was before the world tried to make me smaller." That quote went viral. So did the photo that accompanied it. Avery in a white blazer, red lips, baby bump visible beneath her blouse as she stood in front of the Langston Ventures logo. Unapologetically pregnant, unapologetically powerful. Even her posture had changed. She no longer tilted her head when speaking. No more folded arms or tentative eye contact. She had stopped waiting for rooms to welcome her. She entered like she owned them. Because in many ways, she now did. But the makeover wasn't just external. She worked with a coach, someone her Aunt Evelyn called a mindset architect. Together, they dismantled every belief Avery had once held about what a woman should be. They rebuilt her foundation brick by brick. She learned to stop apologizing, to stop softening her voice, to stop asking for permission to lead. And when the time came, she made her boldest move yet. She took the stage at the annual Women in Innovation Summit, just 7 months pregnant, in front of an audience of 4,000. "I was told I couldn't lead while carrying a child," she said, her voice steady. "I was told I was too emotional, too distracted, too married to the wrong man. And for a while, I believed them." She paused. "But then I remembered, my child doesn't need a mother who plays small. My daughter needs a mother who walks into fire and comes out holding the match." The audience erupted, standing ovation. After that, invitations flooded in, speaking engagements, board positions, podcast interviews, investment partnerships. She declined most of them, not because she wasn't flattered, but because she had a mission now. To create a world where women like her wouldn't have to burn before they were noticed. She launched a mentorship initiative for underfunded female founders. She built a child care support program for working moms in tech. And quietly, behind the scenes, she began acquiring small companies that Carter Global had overlooked. rebuilding an empire of her own. A better one, stronger, smarter, fairer. And as for Liam, he watched it all happen, from the sidelines. At first, he tried to spin the narrative that he and Avery had grown apart, that he was supporting her journey from afar. But the public wasn't buying it, especially not after an anonymous tip leaked the real story to the press about Claire, the affair, the gala. Carter Global stock dipped for the first time in 5 years. Liam's team scrambled. Investors started asking uncomfortable questions. And one night, Liam scrolled through Instagram and saw a photo that made his chest tighten. Avery, in a gold dress, one hand on her belly, the other resting casually on the arm of none other than Evelyn Langston, chairwoman of Langston Ventures. The caption read, "Power is not something you wait for, it's something you step into." The comment section was flooded with fire emojis, applause, quotes from her summit speech. And Liam? He was no longer the headline, Avery was. She had become the woman every little girl dreamed of being. Not because she was perfect, but because she rose. Because she broke, and then rebuilt. Because she didn't let the story end where the pain began. And every time Avery looked in the mirror now, she didn't see a victim. She saw a woman who refused to be erased. She saw power. She saw clarity. And most of all, she saw herself. The Global Tech Leaders Summit was the biggest event of the year. Held in San Francisco's Moscone Center, it was a mecca for CEOs, founders, investors, and reporters from every major outlet in the business world. This year, Carter Global was set to open the summit. It was supposed to be Liam Carter's comeback moment, a chance to polish his image, remind the world why he was once called the golden son of Silicon Alley. But this year, something was different. The energy was strange. The whispers in the crowd weren't about the company's new AI division or its rumored expansion into Europe. They were about Avery. Everywhere Liam turned, he heard her name. Avery Carter's new VC fund. Did you hear she's keynoting day 2? She's taking meetings with Google Ventures now. He brushed it off. Let them talk. Let her have her 15 minutes. He had a presentation to deliver. The ballroom filled with over 2,000 people. Reporters lined the aisles. The stage crew gave Liam the green light. He adjusted his tie, stepped onto the stage, and launched into his polished speech about innovation through disruption. But then, mid-sentence, he paused, because something was happening in the back of the room. People were turning, phones were going up, cameras were flashing. And then he saw her, Avery, 7 months pregnant, in a tailored white power suit that practically glowed under the spotlights, flanked by Evelyn Langston on one side and Daniel Coe, the CEO of Titan Tech, on the other. Daniel was one of Carter Global's most important partners. Liam faltered. Just for a second, then he smiled tightly and continued his speech. But the room's attention had already shifted. By the time he finished, no one clapped, not like they used to. He exited the stage, face tight with forced calm. In the green room, his assistant handed him an envelope. "Sir, this just came from legal." He opened it. It was a notification. Langston Ventures had just acquired 18% of Carter Global stock. They were now the second largest shareholder grade. And Avery Carter was listed as a board nominee. His hands trembled. A few hours later, in the same ballroom, Avery took the stage. No fanfare, no lights, just her voice. 2 years ago, I was told I didn't belong in this room, that I was just someone's wife, that my ideas were too emotional and my strategies too aggressive. She paused, and for a while, I believed them. The audience was silent. But then I remembered. This industry was built by women like me, women who were pushed into the background while others took the credit. She turned, looking directly at Liam, who stood at the side of the room, frozen. Women who were left behind, erased or betrayed, and still came back stronger. A murmur of applause started, then built, then roared. Avery held up a folder. "This is a full investigative report," she said, "on Carter Global's internal financial discrepancies. I didn't want to bring this public, but when transparency is ignored, the truth demands its moment." Gasps. Reporters lunged forward. Liam's face drained of color. "I trusted the man who ran this company," she continued. "But trust is not a business model." She handed the folder to a summit official. "I'm submitting this to the Board of Ethics and requesting an internal review." Then, with perfect calm, she looked at the crowd. "And yes," she said, "I'm also taking my seat on the Carter Global board." effective immediately. The room exploded. Liam stormed out before cameras caught him. But it was too late. The story had already broken. Avery Carter reclaims power at Carter Global, with receipts, headlined every major tech news outlet that afternoon. Within 24 hours, Carter Global's board called an emergency meeting. Within 48, Liam was suspended pending investigation. Within 72, Avery was offered the interim CEO position. She declined, but not before recommending 2 other women she trusted to lead. Because this was never about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was hers and making sure no one else would be erased the way she was. That night, Avery sat in a quiet corner of her hotel suite watching the skyline. Grace, her sister, sat beside her. "You okay?" Grace asked. Avery nodded. "I thought I'd feel angry or triumphant." "And you don't?" "I just feel—" She rested her hand on her belly. Her child kicked softly, not as a cry, as a signal. The storm had passed, and Avery, she had risen above it. 3 months after the summit, Avery Carter gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Alara. Not after a relative, not after a celebrity, but after one of Jupiter's moons. "I wanted her to know," Avery told Grace, "that she was born to orbit no one." The delivery was quiet. No press, no cameras. Just Avery, Grace, and a hand-picked doula who understood birth wasn't just a medical moment, it was a rite of power. And when she held Alara for the first time, Avery didn't cry. She smiled, because this time nothing had been stolen from her. No man's name, no company title, no illusion of protection. This victory was hers, pure, earned, unshaken. In the months that followed, Avery took maternity leave, but not from her purpose. She wrote, she journaled everything. Every betrayal, every awakening, every fire she walked through to become the woman she was now. And then, after a long discussion with her Aunt Evelyn and a quiet coffee with a publisher, she made a decision. She would write a book, but not a memoir, a battle cry. Title: The Erased Wife, How I Rewrote My Story Without Permission. It hit shelves 6 months later, and within a week it became a New York Times bestseller. Because women didn't just read it, they devoured it. Corporate women, single mothers, divorcees, founders, daughters who had watched their mothers disappear in marriages, wives who had been replaced, girlfriends who gave too much. All of them saw themselves in Avery's story, and all of them took something from her words. A reason to speak, a reason to walk away, a reason to rise. Avery began receiving thousands of letters, handwritten, typed, emailed, DM'd. One stood out, from a 19-year-old college student. "They told me I was too emotional to be taken seriously, that no one would ever follow a girl like me. But I read your book, and now I know. My emotions aren't a weakness. They're my compass. Thank you for being the proof I needed." Another came from a woman in her 50s. "After 22 years of being silent in a marriage that shrunk me, I left. Because I watched you walk into that boardroom, and I realized I'm not too old to begin again." Avery read every letter. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she laughed. But always, she answered with the same message. "You are not invisible. And you never were." She began speaking at universities, women's shelters, at corporate conferences. Her voice, once buried beneath someone else's vision, now echoed in rooms she used to be excluded from. But the most powerful moment came a year later. At the Global Equity Forum in New York, she was invited to close the event, a slot typically reserved for heads of state, billionaires, or tech gods. She walked on stage in a black cape-sleeve dress. No jewelry, no teleprompter, just her voice. And the silence of 5,000 people waiting to hear it. "I used to think strength meant staying quiet," she began, "that if I loved hard enough, worked long enough, gave enough, I would earn my seat at the table." She paused. "But here's the truth. Some tables were never built for us, and some rooms never wanted to hear us." A ripple of nods moved through the crowd. "So we build new tables. We walk into the rooms anyway. We bring chairs, we bring each other, we speak." Applause, tears, phones raised, capturing history. Avery looked directly into the cameras. "To every woman who was made to feel replaceable, invisible, or too much, I want you to hear me clearly." She took a breath. "You are not too much. You were never too much. You were just too powerful for small places." A roar of applause. She stepped back, curtain down. But the impact? Permanent. Her speech was replayed across every social platform, quoted in classrooms, printed in magazines. And for the first time in her life, Avery wasn't known as someone's wife, someone's mistake, or someone's past. She was known as herself, a woman who had everything taken from her and built something bigger in return. And when Alara turned 1, Avery posted a photo. No filters, just a mother in jeans and a baby in her lap. The caption read, "This is the legacy. Not the companies, not the titles, but the courage to be whole. Loud, unapologetic, and finally, free." So the story has ended. Our wonderful friends, are you still here right now reading this? If you are, then maybe, just maybe, something about Avery's story is still echoing inside you. Maybe you've been silenced before, maybe you've been overlooked, erased, or told to stay small. But listen to me, healing begins the moment you stop apologizing for who you are. As heterodoxism reminds us, what breaks you also reveals you. Avery wasn't just betrayed, she was rebuilt. And maybe so can you. If this story stirred something real in your heart, don't let it fade. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Comment your truth below. Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. Let's rise together, because you're not broken, you're becoming.